Welcome to episode 29 of the Hunt Backcountry podcast presented by Exo Mountain Gear. Austin Quapp, you were this week's giveaway winner. Thank you so much for listening and sending us your feedback. Listeners, if you want to enter these weekly giveaways, it's really simple. Just leave us your feedback or comments at podcast@exomountaingear.com, or better yet, leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you happen to be listening to this. In this week's show, we're speaking with Matt Wymer of RemotePursuits.com. Matt has an interesting history and unique perspective in the hunting world. Used to live in the lower 48 and has now lived in Alaska for the last 12 years and hunted and learned quite a bit while doing so. So it's interesting to talk about gear and different aspects of hunting Alaska. Get into a bit about Dall sheep, which is Matt's real passion. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Be sure to check out the show notes, including some of the resources that we talk about in this episode at exomountaingear.com/29. Without further ado, here's the show.
The Hunt Backcountry podcast is proudly brought to you by Exo Mountain Gear, makers of ultralight, ultra-tough packs that are designed to do what you love most, hunt the backcountry. Exo packs are designed for efficiency, simplicity, and durability that's backed by a lifetime warranty. To learn more about Exo Mountain Gear, please visit www.exomountaingear.com.
Matt, welcome to the Hunt Backcountry podcast. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet, man. You're up in Alaska. You just actually were saying that some snow's headed your way?
Yeah, we got snow in the forecast, winter storm watch in March. So.
Wow. And where are you at in Alaska exactly?
I live in Anchorage.
In Anchorage. Okay, cool. What's the weather
for
like?
About half the state lives here in Anchorage, roughly.
Yeah, for sure, population-wise.
Yeah.
What's the weather like up for you in Boise, Steve?
It was actually snowing today, but not. It's just kind of like a 15-minute little deal. It's been been spring here the last week, rainy and kind of 40, 50 degrees. So
yeah, stuff's starting to green up just a little bit here, so it's kind of exciting to see.
Yeah.
So, well, cool, Matt. So for the listeners who aren't familiar with you, have your site Remote Pursuits, which I would definitely encourage everybody to go check out. You have some awesome content up there in terms of not only your personal sort of hunting stories and hunting tales, but a ton of awesome information, gear reviews. You've dived deep into some of that stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit here in a bit. But could you go ahead and give us an introduction kind of your, kind of personal hunting background, and then how you got up to Alaska and kind of how you started the site and all of the above?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Eastern Washington chasing mule deer over in the Okanagan, Omak area. Back it was a base camp type hunting. We're pretty successful. It's been an area my family's hunted since the 50s. And so I came to Alaska kind of thinking it'd be easy.
And, because it was at home, right?
Yeah. So the heavy wool clothes we wore there with, day packs was quite a bit different than what we experienced up here. It just kind of took a few years to get used to Alaska and the differences and transitioning to more backpack style hunting. You can do base camp hunting here, but it just takes a lot of effort to get to where you set up your base camp versus driving to it in most cases.
Right.
I think the biggest eye opener going to Alaska was just every hunt is an adventure. It's logistically a challenge. Logistics change everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The road system's limited. Where you hunt to get away from everybody is out there, and just requires a good pack list to make sure you don't forget anything.
Yeah.
A lot of planning and thought, and a lot of us learned the hard way. It's great to find guys up here who grew up here, hunted it all their life, and don't know any different. They're the prepared guys, the guys you want to take with you.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Us new guys don't get invited much. We have to figure it out on our
own. So how long have you been in Alaska?
10 years this
10
March,
years?
actually.
Okay,
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's very cool. So was that kind of the biggest shift and the biggest surprises was just kind of the logistics and just the depth and the research required for even, it's almost like I would imagine comparing it to somebody who's out of state hunting. You can be in Alaska and hunt Alaska, but it almost feels like this out of state, if you will, expedition just because it's so involved. Was that the biggest sort of shift for you?
Yeah, one of my second hunts or third hunts up here, we drove all the way up the Haul Road and did a walk-in sheep hunt. And as far as we drove was kind of like driving from Oregon to somewhere in the Dakotas or further. Almost, it seemed like it's just it was a long drive.
Yeah,
day and a half of driving.
Yeah,
and then you got to go 5 miles off the road just to be in hunting terrain. So
wow, I mean, it is amazing for those of us who don't consciously think about it, just the size of Alaska. If you kind of hop online and there's different maps and graphics where they kind of take the state of Alaska and plop it over the lower 48. I mean, it swallows a huge, huge chunk of many, many states in the lower 48. So, have you found, with Alaska, you're in Anchorage and then obviously hunting in different areas. Have you been surprised by not only the size, but the diversity of the terrain?
Yeah, although Alaska isn't where the parts I've hunted haven't been as diverse as even just the different sections of the woods in eastern Washington. It's pretty wet and mucky and pretty brushy until you get above tree line, and then it's pretty open. And some areas are really steep and some areas are less steep. That's kind of your diversity, I guess.
Okay, so it is pretty consistent, at least where you've been then.
Yeah, and then there's tundra and then there's the swamps. I think listening to Steve and his buddies moose hunt, they did,
They've seen the swamps, apparently.
We got the swamps, yeah.
They've been in the tundra, so.
Yeah.
And hiking that tundra, it looks nice, like a big grass field, and you're knee deep walking on top of the tussocks, and it's just whole different world and the amount of terrain you can cover. Look at a map and say, it's only 10 miles.
Yeah.
It's a long 10 miles sometimes.
Right. Wow. So
what?
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh yeah, one thing, when we went on the moose hunt, we actually met Matt there in Anchorage for lunch, and I remember him saying how hard it was actually just to even get away from hunters, though, as big and remote as Alaska is. It was something that really shocked me.
Mm.
Well, that's true if you're a budget hunter like me.
Oh, okay.
If you're not renting the Super Cub, and then,
Yeah, I choose to put my kids in private school, so that limits the fun, so to speak, and you can easily buy solitude if you're willing to fly somewhere, but even then, if there's a strip, you're not the only pilot landing there, or your pilot probably isn't the only pilot landing there.
Yeah.
We have more airplanes per capita here than anywhere, so.
Right. That's an interesting point. I guess a landing strip is kind of like a destination trailhead for somebody in the lower 48. If you stick close to that, I mean, you could be running into competition for sure. Yeah,
every once in a while you get lucky and there's no one around, but you could land at a strip that you think no one knows but you, and lots of planes flying out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it just surprised me. I just think of Alaska and just being remote and, completely alone and solo, and just when you'd made those comments that it can be hard to get away from people it was just definitely surprising.
Especially for something like sheep.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many walk-ins you can do, and everybody with a map thinks they're pretty creative, and we all end up in the same spot.
You're all trying to outthink each other and thinking the same way by outthinking each other.
Yeah. I mean, I ended up going in off the haul road, and we're thinking this is great, and then we look up ahead, and there's one guy ahead of us, and an hour later, there's two guys hauling rear end behind us, and another hour later, 15 Boy Scouts coming out. So it's like, that was 6 months of planning. We thought we had a pretty good idea, and so did 3 other guys in a Boy Scout troop.
That's funny.
Did you find any sheep on that hunt?
Yeah, we saw some sublegals, and then we saw some that looked really good, but they're about 3 miles off the haul road. And when you're hunting with a rifle, you have to be 5 miles away from the pipeline.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
So that's why you get a lot of guys that'll bow hunt the haul road, because you can shoot the caribou, and then you can chase the sheep that are within that 5 mile corridor.
Huh.
And you hope that the rifle hunters put some pressure on you so you can get a shot. But
yeah. Yeah, see, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always heard about guys hunting caribou on the haul road, or just off of, but I didn't realize that was a 5 mile limit for firearms. That's very interesting.
Yeah, some Yahoo shot the pipeline a while back, and I don't know if that's what started it or not, but I definitely know that's part of the factor.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So we've mentioned a few things already, and kind of the species that we tend to think about with Alaska in terms of things like caribous and sheep, obviously moose that you guys hunted, Steve. But, there's many species and some that I don't think people think of. It surprises me when I started doing some research that there's, a good huntable elk population even in Alaska. And I don't think of that. I don't think many people think of elk. What are some of the other species and opportunities that exist up there, Matt?
I think one of the easiest hunts for a lower 48 guy to do is the blacktail deer hunts. All through the southeast, even Kodiak. Even out of Anchorage, guys can go to Prince William Sound, hire a boat to take them out. And there's pretty generous bag limits.
It's like 10 deer or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's but you can carry them over your shoulders,
Yeah,
I'm exaggerating a bit, but yeah, they're smaller.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So that would be the Sitka blacktail subspecies then?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, that's very cool. So since you've been up there, I know that you love to chase sheep, and we'll talk about that, but what species have you hunted while you've been a resident up there?
I've participated in an elk hunt where someone else had a tag, and I just went along for moral support.
Okay.
And that was fun. It's an amazing country down there. Chased caribou and shot a caribou. Had a moose tag and got a moose. Of course, sheep hunting. Been on a few bear hunts, but always kind of just as a partner with someone chasing a bear, not actually hunting myself.
Yeah. And is a resident or most of those tags relatively easy to obtain then?
You can get a tag for anything over the counter. There's no specific tag you have to draw as a resident. There is specific hunt areas you have to draw.
Okay.
So anything close to basically Anchorage or certain population centers, maybe down the Kenai, anything with easy access, they typically limit the tags.
Okay. Yeah.
Or if there's a wildlife management program in place of some sort.
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But black bear, I think you can, when you get your black bear tag, I want to say 5 tags. You can get 5 black bear, I think.
Wow.
I don't quote me that off the top of my head, but I think it's 5 on there.
Yeah. That's wild. And then there's some interesting, for the listeners who might not be aware, there's some interesting guidelines, I will say, for non-residents that apply to certain species, in that to hunt certain species in Alaska, you have to be with a licensed guide or a family member who's a resident of Alaska. And I believe that's for grizzly bear, Dall sheep, and mountain goat. Is that correct, Matt? Do you know?
Yes, those are the 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Mountain goat, Dall sheep, and grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Or brown bear. Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's quite interesting. So, and then the family member, is that, I'm wondering how they even enforce that. Do you know?
I don't know what they check, but I know what the law is.
Yeah, right.
If I had a sister and someone married her and she lived up here, then that would kind of obviously make them able to do that.
Okay.
It's like one removed or something, right? Somebody told me that.
Well, maybe this is a better example. My wife's brother, he could come hunt with me.
Okay.
Right.
So he could come. Like my good buddy here at work, his dad lives in Colorado and goes up sheep hunting with him every year.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So he's able to do that.
And
I think that's pretty much. Go ahead.
Do you know, does that give you a better chance at that tag as well, or does it guarantee a tag in terms of that family situation?
Well, you can buy a tag, any of the over-the-counter tags, no problem.
Even the non-resident can?
Correct, yep.
Really?
Yep.
Wow, that's awesome.
But to hunt it, you have to have either the license or be with your kin, right? So.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. That is very cool.
I need to convince a family member to move up there, apparently.
No joke. Yeah. I was just, yeah. So, could you...
I think that's how the meat eater guy, I think that's how he hunts up here. He's got a brother up here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think I have heard that. So I'm curious, Matt, could you adopt me or anything? Like, can we work something out? Or is that not...
The tax benefits there, I don't know how many... I get your whole clan.
Yeah, you can claim us all as dependents.
As long as I get your PFDs.
That's funny. So going back to kind of your transition to Alaska, we obviously talked a little bit about just the logistics and everything is involved and how different it was from Washington. One of the things that for sure is different hunting in Alaska than a lot of what most of us encounter in the lower 48 in terms of terrain and weather, and then the gear choices that are dictated because of that. So what are some of the specific gear items that you had to change or pay more attention to or sort of add to your lineup to hunt Alaska successfully compared to what you were used to in the lower 48?
Yeah, let me. So my dad always, went to the Army Navy store and got the surplus wool pants, kind of a cheapo blaze orange vest. Never took rain gear. We'd wear pack boots or maybe some White's logger boots, growing up in a logging town.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we used, and it worked, and it was successful, and it still works in that area. And probably some tough guys up here can still make it work. I thought I'd gone big time when I graduated to the Columbia's Gallatin Range wool, if I'm saying that right. That heavy series of kind of that dark brown camo they had.
Yeah.
I thought, boy, I got good gear now. You come up here, and if you take that off and got to haul it anywhere, it's pretty heavy. And you're moving a lot more up here, so it's pretty hot. And so it kind of really forced me into layers, which was interesting because in college I did a lot of rock climbing and some backcountry skiing. And so I kind of had gotten used to layering in that process. Just never thought of it for hunting. Just hadn't pushed that envelope, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it really became layers and then finding rain gear. And kind of my whole journey through rain gear is what really led me to start Remote Pursuits, was through a rain gear review, just asking some questions on a forum. And then Kenton at First Light said, well, if you're going to ask the question, I'm going to send you the rain gear. Why don't you test it?
Mm.
And then Sitka and Cryptek and Kuiu all chimed in. And before I knew it, I had, a ton of rain gear at my house and a lot of testing to do.
It's exciting stuff, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Learned a lot. Yeah, you want to recap that test for us?
Yeah, so it was 3 years ago maybe now. And so I got so much rain gear, I had to break it into kind of two tests, the lightweight rain gear and the heavy duty rain gear. And my question was, is there really much of a difference between a $50 rain jacket and a $500 rain jacket?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because Alaska's so rough on gear, I just thought, who in the world would spend $500 for a rain jacket? But then you spend more time in them, and the cheaper stuff, there is certain ones that work, but they're not as breathable. Sometimes they wet out a lot quicker. They don't dry out as fast. But when you get to those kind of higher end fabrics, the Toray, the Gore-Tex, I think it's 36.5 now that First Light's using, there's just total different performance in the fabrics. The breathability, how quick it can dry, even the durability of it, and it just made a huge difference.
Yeah.
How are you testing, like the breathability and those other aspects?
Yeah, breathability is really hard to test because, the only real test of breathability is a lab, and everybody second guesses the lab. But my test is for breathability, I'd get on a spin bike, I'd put the temperature in the house at the same temperature. I'd remember, make notes of the cadence on the spin bike, and I'd do a 20, 30, maybe a 40-minute workout because it was the only controlled environment I had, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best you can do. Yeah.
And I just zip the jackets all up, sweat like a pig, and power away, and then just kind of see which ones were the dampest. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, if a jacket's damp and another jacket's damper, it's kind of a hard test to do. So in reality, it's either it breathes or it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're talking the technicality of, thousands of XYZ versus the other, for me, I kind of did, that's great on paper, but it either breathes or it doesn't. It's kind of the essence of how it worked for me. And then waterproofness is a lot easier. You can do a shower test, but shower tests are even, you got warm water or cold water, and it's not getting pressed like a pack on your back would. So for the waterproof test, we just go out and use it in the field. And my hunting buddy is the same size as me, so he'd run it a lot. He even got my wife to do it a few times on some hikes, get her some baggy rain gear, and just go out and test it and then compare actual field analysis versus what you do in kind of your quasi labs.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a conversation with one of the guys who started one of these outdoor companies, him and his buddy tested it in a washing machine. So they'd take fabrics and they'd put it in a washing machine in the backyard and let it run until it destroyed the fabric. I couldn't do that. One, it was all this rain gear, and being a gear guy, I was like, I can't destroy it.
Right.
But, that's a one way to test durability per se.
Mm-hmm.
But
interesting. So what did you experience on the saturation point? Because I've noticed that, even though a fabric can be waterproof, at some point there's it saturates and then water just starts coming through.
Yeah. And some fabrics seem to hold water versus shed water.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So, First Light's first version of their storm type jacket, it would hold water, didn't necessarily leak through, but it definitely visibly looked wetter than some of the other products.
Yeah.
But it was also a lot quieter. So that quieter face fabric kind of held water. So you got the benefit of the quiet, but then it held water.
Yeah.
So in other words, you couldn't shake it as dry as you could maybe a harder face fabric of, say, a Gore-Tex product.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say one's better than the other. They're just different. Kind of understanding that as you pick the rain gear for what you're trying to do.
So at the end of the test, what were your kind of top 3 jackets?
Well, that test and the gear I tested at the time I was thinking of a sheep hunt, and Sitka had made the Dew Point, and it was, 10, 12 ounces a piece compared to what jackets I'd had in the past that were just the jacket was that much.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up using the Dew Point for sheep hunting. And then the First Light Storm Type jacket has a much different fit than any of the other rain gear. It's very baggy in the front, kind of designed for wearing binos underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And in Alaska, that's where I always wear like a Glock 20 for bears. So for hiking and fishing and pretty much anything other than sheep hunting, I really like that First Light Storm Type fit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of I ended up thinking no one will ever own 5 sets of rain gear, and I probably still have that many.
Yeah. Well, there's so many trade-offs, and you can have, as you mentioned, the Sitka's lighter. The fit on the First Light might have another advantage, and then you can always compare which one's quieter than which one's, that again, kind of how you talked about which one sheds water versus which one, holds water, still keeps it out for the most part, but kind of holds it. So it really does depend on, probably weighing 4 or 5 different comparisons and deciding what you were looking for.
And that's been kind of the fun conversation to have with someone who maybe hits me up on a forum or calls me up and says, hey, what rain gear do I need? And just kind of teasing that through is what exactly are you doing? Because I think you look at like Sitka's line, they have 8, 10 different rain jackets. And you're not going to be happy if you take their whitetail one and try to take it on a sheep hunt. It's just it's not designed for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I'm curious, Matt. Sorry, go ahead.
And I also think that in the lightweight group, it's pretty neat to see First Light's new jacket this year. I've been testing it a little bit this spring. It's been a pretty dry spring, so I haven't wrapped up my test yet, but it's pretty neat. It seems like every year new stuff comes out. So while you have a favorite, it's always changing.
Yeah. Something that we just kind of naturally talk about quite a bit in terms of, being backpack hunters and getting into the backcountry is, lightweight gear. I'm interested with you being in Alaska. Clearly, sheep hunting, you do want lightweight gear, but do you think that you prioritize durability maybe a bit more than some other folks do just because of the demands of Alaska?
I think you would on certain things.
Okay.
But not everything. I'm still going to haul 40, 50 pounds going in, with your weapon and everything, at least, maybe more. And really that's food.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want too flimsy of a pack. So I've used the Exo pack and the Stone Glacier pack, and they've worked really well for me.
We've heard good things about that Exo.
Yeah, I bet. Probably on your favorite list, right?
Yeah.
So I like those, the fact that they're lightweight. I had an external frame pack before I started jumping into packs, and you run the whole gauntlet of $900 dropped on 12 packs versus just spending the $600 on the $700 on the right pack the first time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people probably called you with that, Steve.
Oh yeah, I get plenty of them.
Yeah.
What if you're looking at packs? What have you noticed being the main differences as you've tested? I mean, you've mentioned the Exo, you've mentioned the Stone Glacier. As we're talking on Skype, I look at your profile picture, you're wearing a QU. So I'm not saying, which one's your favorite, but just in terms of the differences as you compare these different higher end packs, what stood out to you?
I think the biggest frustrating part for me was I could not get a pack to stick in the small of my back. In other words, I'd put it on, it'd be great. You throw anything over 40 pounds in it, and maybe for a half-hour hike it'd be fine. But after that, I just was constantly cranking the hip belts down almost to where you feel like you're bruising your hips.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kuiu pack was probably my first high-end pack. I liked it. I just could never get it tight. They sent me a kind of an older version of their waist belt, and I somewhat solved it. But then ended up trying a pack that someone else had, and that sort of worked. And for me, it's really about fit. Because while I may really like pack 1 or pack 2, might not fit another guy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably a tougher guy to fit, so at least it seems like hitting the people I've talked to. My buddy, he throws a pack on and it works for him.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really about fit. And the 2 packs that have fit me the best so far is the waist belts on the Stone Glacier and the EXO.
Yeah. I'm curious, not to get off on a rant, but
Sure.
I get emails, and as you do, Matt, and I'm sure obviously clearly you do, Steve, of so many guys who run into those same issues. They've had an issue with a pack in the past. They want a pack that's going to fit them now as they're shopping, but it really is, tough to fit necessarily a body type and say for sure, this is going to be absolutely perfect for you until you try it, right? And so What do you do, Steve? Are there things you look for in general? I mean, I know that you guys have like the trial period and things like that, but beyond that, what is some shopping advice, just in general about pack fit to help guys who are in that situation of wanting to try things, but clearly can't buy 4 or 5 high-end packs and try them all in the field?
Whew, that's a tough one. Any of
that's
the
why that's why everybody's always asking.
Yeah.
It is tough.
I mean, any of the high-end packs are they're going to have different waist belt sizes. That's going to be critical, right? Getting, if you're a 30-inch waist, and you buy a generic pack from Cabela's, it's probably going to max out on you and not get tight enough. And then you're going to run into like Matt's problems of it. The belt and lumbar pads sliding down on you, and then weight ends up on your shoulders. So making sure that you find a pack that's got a belt size that's going to fit you. We do a small, medium, large with EXO, and it seems to cover 98% of our guys. Understanding your torso measurement is a critical one. Again, most of these high-end packs, it's going to have adjustable torso, so you should be able to get it to fit you. But some guys could be 6'3" with an 18-inch torso, and the next guy could be 6'3" with a 22-inch torso. So you just kind of need to know that. And then the next thing would be what the shape of your back is. Do you have a flat back? Do you have, like me, my hips are rotated pretty far forward, so I have a really good curve at the lower end of my back, which is an interesting side note. When Lenny and I are always prototyping and testing stuff, he's got more of a flat back, and so we're kind of always saying we're getting opposite things on the pressure, which evens out for us, but it gets frustrating at times between the two of us. But so understand what your back is. With EXO, we have just kind of a frame shape to it that just kind of it's pretty kind of neutral, I guess you could say. For me, I get not quite enough lumbar pressure because I have a really good curve. I would like more. For Lenny, he gets too much because he has a really flat back. So it really seems to cover most of the guys. But there's other companies out there that are just going to have a flat stay to it. There's not going to be any shape. So, that may ride a little differently on you. Other companies may have a lot of curve to their stays. So a guy with a flat back is going to complain about lumbar pressure. You'll kind of see that, if you're researching forums or stuff. Like one guy will complain about pack X has a lumbar pad that just feels like a knee jabbing into their lower back. And that guy's probably got a really flat back.
And
so
it might
his
have
answer,
more to do with the frame shape than just the lumbar pad specifically.
Yeah, the frame shape and the lumbar pad together. Yeah. So that guy would benefit from, trying to find a way to take foam out of that lumbar pad and make it smaller. Corey Jacobson's one of those guys, with the EXO, he's got a flat back, and so it benefits him to make the lumbar pad smaller so it starts wrapping better on him. But I guess that would be, look for belt sizes, adjustable torso, and understand the shape of your back, and that'll help get you on the right path to making an informed decision.
Yeah. Cool.
I think one of the big tips I always point people to too is look at the videos. Steve and Lenny put a lot of good videos. Kurt puts a lot of good videos. The guys at Cafaro do. Mm-hmm. Those videos walk you through how to fit the pack, and you can't just pick it up out of the box and throw it on, or go with some guy on the forum who says, "Yeah, it fits me if I adjust it this way."
Right.
There's a lot of good information there, and it's really, really helpful.
Yeah. It does frustrate me sometimes. I'll see a guy wearing, I'll see a picture of him wearing the pack, and I can just tell that the torso's way wrong, or he's just not wearing the pack correctly. A lot of guys like to wear the pack way too low instead of getting it centered up on their hip bones. I wish everybody would watch the fitting video and really pay attention to it that we put out. We actually set it up so it automatically gets emailed to every customer after an order, just so it is that important that even though you have a high-end pack, making sure that it's set up and fit for you, you're going to get the most out of it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's good. So moving on beyond packs, Matt, I'm curious. There's so many things that pop into my head when I think of hunting Alaska and how it might vary a bit. Things like footwear for sure. I mean, you mentioned wearing a pair of whites down in the lower 48, and that's not going to cut it. Do you go with kind of a typical mountain boot? I'm sure that would be, suitable for sheep hunting in terms of, something like a lower or what have you.
Yeah, I went through quite a journey with boots. When I first came up here, I had a pair of La Sportiva. I think they're called the Muckalas, if I'm saying it right. Mm-hmm. And I wore them on my first sheep hunt, and it was just sopping wet the whole time. We were coming on and off a glacier a lot, running water, and I swear they shrunk a whole size. Mm. And so it kind of started me, okay, if those aren't the boot, what is? And I ended up with a pair of Cabela's Alaskan guide boots, which worked great for a few years. I just think our boots get so wet and pushed so hard up here. And if you go out more than once a year, you're gonna have to replace them every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So when I went to replace them, I tried some Zamberlan boots, tried another pair of La Sportivas, went through a couple different boots, and then I went with Lathrop and Sons, and being with Rockslide, was able to kind of do a good review on that and just wander through the boot fitting process. And that solved my problem with one boot purchase. It wasn't really the boot I wanted, but I looked at another boot that was taller and bigger, and he said, "Just trust me. This is what you need." And I was still paying for the boot, so it was hard to just say, "Okay."
Right.
And so when you're spending $400 plus for a pair of boots, you want to be able to say, "I like that boot. That's the one I want."
Yeah.
But that's what got me in trouble with the other ones I'd bought. So.
Yeah.
And I've had no blisters with those boots since. So they fit the right boot to me. I have the Loa Bighorns.
Okay. Is that a leather or synthetic?
It's a leather boot with a Gore-Tex liner.
Okay. And do you have to pay special attention treating that leather so it doesn't kind of saturate out on you over time?
Yeah, I just put Loa has stuff on their website about how to treat their boot. Just follow their directions. The biggest thing I have is even that rubber rand around the edge. You'll get that tore up in sheep country sometimes. Mm-hmm. So just getting the glue on there and trying to glue that all back together.
Yeah.
Kind of frustrating on an expensive boot, but I imagine what you'd done to the leather if it weren't for the rand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just as a side note for you listeners who maybe haven't caught it, if you want to head back through some of the older episodes, we actually did kind of an episode on boots with the Lathrop and Sons guys, and it was a fun conversation and informative for sure. We've heard from quite a few folks who found that helpful. So if you're in that situation, boot shopping, maybe you want to check that out.
Yeah, if you're the lucky guy who can walk into a boot store and grab the one you like and walk out and never have a blister, then good for you. But
yeah,
if you struggle a bit, it's kind of like the whole circle of packs. You spend $900 on 12 to get to one. You do the same thing with boots, and they solve it from the get-go. And you pay that one-time fee, and now you know what the boot is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it so fascinating with Lathrop, and they're outfitting hunters all over the place, all throughout the West, and even guys like you up in Alaska. And it's like they're located, none of the above. They're like in the middle of the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere. And of all things, my my hunting buddy that I go elk hunting with, he lives out like really close to them. And so he's like the most fortunate guy ever. He can just literally walk into their shop and all the boots that they have, he can try on, he can get their advice in person. I'm like, man, you're absolutely just so fortunate, you know? So anything else stick out to you, Matt? I'm sure, you know, things like maybe your optics choices and even especially shelter choices, I would imagine, get pretty critical for Alaska. I'm sure that we could get in depth on all kinds of things for quite a while, but in terms of the items you found categorically to be the most important for Alaska, is there anything else that stands out for you?
I think the most important thing is a list.
Yeah.
And actually following it and checking it. No, just when you're way back there, it's not the time to find out you're missing a key item. Mm-hmm. And it's a fun process. I'm kind of a gear junkie. I mostly work in a cubicle, so having something to daydream about in terms of gear and getting out is always fun. I work in Excel a lot for my day job, so having access to that mindset of making a list has been helpful for me. I probably overanalyze it, as Steve can probably attest to my, it's kind of how I got to know Steve, was asked a lot of questions till he finally remembered me.
Yeah, lots of emails back and forth for sure.
Well, yeah, I was looking through a folder of them. I was like, oh man, I feel bad. I've bugged you a lot. Speaking of shelters, I've been using, a Big Agnes tent for years hunting in August. And, I mainly hunt sheep. It's just been, my buddies in Alaska tell me I need to branch out, but it's just kind of been my sick obsession. I'm not very good at it, but I do chase them a lot. And this year I drew a really good sheep tag in the Chugach, which is pretty much in my backyard, but the time of year, it can be very nice or it can be really, really nasty, big winds and snow dump in. So it definitely changing my tent option is on the works for this year.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's like, my grand experience of hunting Alaska once. I think it's, everything's just more critical. I here in Idaho, I take for granted, like I really don't get too hung up on, maybe I'll chance at something being lightweight. And maybe if it breaks on me, hey, I'm freaking 4-hour hike at the most back to the truck and, maybe I'll lose half a day or something like that. But when we got dropped off on plane, and you're 100 miles from nowhere, everything's just more critical. And like Matt's Matt's saying that, his list and just making sure you've got your gear tested and proven and, don't necessarily need backups of everything, but you need to make sure what you got is working. And that's where Matt was asking about, 4-season, Hilleberg tents there, because probably don't want to take that Big Agnes on a 3-season tent and all of a sudden have 4 foot of snow dump on you.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Steve too. So if I remember right, you flew into Anchorage, and then where'd you guys go from Anchorage?
Bethel, and then roughly 100 miles north of Bethel. So
yeah. So you took a flight from Anchorage to Bethel, and how far is that? Do you remember? I try to remember.
Hour and a half, something like that.
Yeah, hour and a half flight, and then you got to Bethel, and then you had another probably half-hour flight, right?
Like 45 minutes plus. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of terrain that is huge.
Yeah. There's
no
no
long
option,
ways.
No option to hike out or. If your sat phone battery dies, you're SOL until someone comes pick you up, and gear all of a sudden becomes very, very important. It definitely kind of opened Lenny and I's eyes to, just waterproof gear. Like I said, we luckily had the First Light Boundary pants and jacket. And that first 3 days it rained nonstop. And I don't even pack a rain jacket in Idaho in September unless I know it's like 100% chance of rain, which is pretty rare. So it just, it's definitely an eye opener, and gear becomes a lot more serious.
Yeah. Well, in some of those hunts where you get flown in and you have the capacity and you're going to be operating out of a base camp, you take maybe even 2 or 3 sets of rain gear. Mm-hmm. Sometimes like a Helly Hansen bib, because you're going to be wading in muck, and then you take the breathable stuff just as backups because you mud it up and wet it out like you talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I kind of want to get on the technical side of that, because it definitely, after like 3 days of being just soaking wet day in and day out, water starts to come through the jacket. And I know that they have some type of waterproof rating, but I don't know the technical aspect of what the saturation point is and maybe it's the humidity. There's some factors going on there where water can get inside, even though it's quote unquote waterproof fabric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's waterproof and breathable. So there's vapors escaping from the inside, right?
Right.
And when you start clogging up pores and cramming it full of stuff, it changes that dynamic between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And it can create that bleed through. I know typically in my rain pants, the first part that starts leaking is my knees because I love the knee pad pants, like the Sitka Mountain pants or the Timberline pants. And you have that knee pad on over whatever rain pants you're wearing. So you're constantly dropping your knees in wet muck or, crawling around trying to put a stock on something. And that's where my rain pants start leaking, is right where all that mud and gunk gets crammed into that area. It seems to be prone to failure when it gets mudded out, I guess you could say.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
You talk to Gore-Tex and they really want you to wash your gear. A lot of guys will go 2 or 3 years without even washing their rain jacket, and it's just designed to operate and breathe when it's clean.
Really? Yeah, I would be one who never washes my rain jacket thinking I'll wash away the DWR coating or something.
Yeah. Each manufacturer has their specifications for what they want you to do, so I don't want to speak for them, but...
Yeah, and some of them, too, specifically, I think on DWRs, they also recommend that you dry it because some of a certain level of heat will reactivate or sort of recharge, if you will, that DWR.
And Nick Wax makes products you can wash that kind of coating back into it too.
Yeah, right. I have one. It's not in front of me. I don't have the name, but it's actually a spray that you're supposed to apply either post wash. I think it is post wash, not post dry, but it's sort of like a DWR enhancer, if you will, or preserver.
And then when you dry,
a few options. Yeah. Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about it for sure, Matt, but I wanted to dive in a bit deeper into your passion of sheep hunting. It was kind of fun talking before the episodes. You've had successful sheep hunts since you've been up there in Alaska, and you also have mentioned that although it's your passion, that you've obviously learned from mistakes, and you don't consider yourself the best sheep hunter.
Not by a long shot.
Yeah, we just always love learning. So whether it's been from your positive experiences or from those things where you're kicking yourself because you made a dumb mistake, but you're learning a lesson. I'd just love to hear more about your pursuit of sheep hunting. I guess before we get into the specifics, in your words or in your experience, you kind of mentioned other hunters have encouraged you to branch out up there in Alaska, but what draws you to sheep and what's keeping you so infatuated with that species right now?
I wish I knew.
It's just a sickness.
Yeah. When I was a kid, there was a guy that came to our house, and he grown up in Alaska. I think he was actually like a bush pilot missionary up here and ended up moving overseas. And so when he moved overseas, he gave my dad a set of ram horns. I don't even think they're full curl. I think they're 3/4 curl from looking at them over the years. I never could make them full curl. And they hung outside the door to my room as a kid growing up. And then my grandfather was a big hunter, and somehow I read some of the books, the old outdoor life magazines lying around, and there's usually always a pretty fascinating sheep hunting there. Guys like Jack O'Connor, of course, come to mind, and just a lot of those old stories. I couldn't even tell you who they were, and somehow the adventure of it always intrigued me, but I never thought it'd be possible. Just seemed kind of like an impossible dream, I guess, so to speak. Then when you move to Alaska, kind of reality hits in. Wow, this is over the counter? Anybody can do this? But I didn't really have a network, and all the people up here that were sheep hunters kind of said, "Oh, that's nice. You want to go? Well, good luck." And
SOL.
Yeah.
They'd give you some tips, but everyone kind of had their routine of where they went, and some guys were willing to spend more money than I was, and I kind of struggled through finding someone to go with. And a friend of mine who was up here for a few years working from Washington, we connected and went on a sheep hunt. And I really learned that being a runner and being in great shape doesn't mean a whole lot in sheep country. I thought, I'd be good to go. I ran cross country in high school, so it'd be no problem. You throw 50 pounds on your back and go across a frozen glacier for 10 miles or up in the mountains. It's just a different world. Mm-hmm. So physically, I was unprepared. In great shape, but not mountain fit, if that makes sense.
Yep.
A heavier guy who was stronger, you can always get your wind back. Just pause and take a few moments. When your legs are shaking and done, you're kind of done. You can only take so much supplements for your body crashes. Only so many Red Bulls, I guess. So that first hunt was physically taxing. I just kind of blew my mind. That was back when the Wrangles were a 3/4 curl. So we had a good shot at a legal ram, but he kind of slipped into the fog and was gone. And then that friend of mine ended up moving on back to the lower 48, went on some hunts with a few other guys, eventually connected with my good hunting partner. And I think that's what really led to success, was two guys who could get on the same page. Neither one of us had egos with each other. Hey, whatever you want to teach, let's learn from each other. We figured it out. We researched, read a lot of books on sheep hunting, which seemed odd because the books would say this, and we get out in the field and it wouldn't work like the book said.
Imagine that.
Yeah, go figure, huh? And then sometimes it would, so you could understand it, but at least helped get you into the right mindset for being up there and chasing them. And really just kind of through trial and error, it seemed like we'd find a really good spot and then there'd be people there. And so the challenge has been finding a good spot where people aren't there. This last year, for instance, we drove 8-9 hours out of Anchorage, ended up rafting a full day from 2 different rivers. They rafted one kind of stream to get to another. So we thought this complicated process would get us away. We pop around the corner and there's 4 tents on the sandbar. It's like, oh man, kind of guy in a jet boat coming up the river.
Wow.
It's like, oh man. So we went more down and tried a few different things, but that's just been the toughest part, really, is all your route planning and stuff gets away from you when you run into people. Mm-hmm. But the physical conditioning, the being up in sheep country, something about being up above the tree line. I've had some really close encounters with sheep. It's been pretty fun. I had 2 times I've had a ewe and about a half curl ram come within 6-8 feet of me. Just didn't see you, just walking on a ridgeline, walking right up to you. And that's probably as neat as the one I killed.
Yeah, for sure. That would be amazing.
Wow. So, out of curiosity, going back to the fitness side of it, what have you changed? Being a runner and then going into hunting, what's your workout routine look like?
Yeah, my workout routine varies. That's a good way of putting it. I think for me, it's just been focusing on strength. You can't do everything running, and I don't like the gym. So that makes it kind of tough. But I just found sandbags, the spin bike, which is a different muscle than running, has helped. Mm-hmm. And then just having kids and getting out and hiking. And I usually got a kid up on my shoulders, which is probably actually harder than a backpack. And just putting more time actually out hiking. Yeah. I still run just to keep the wind up, because you do need a good wind. It helps. But just concentrating on building the strength in the legs. And I mainly use sandbags. The brute force gear sandbags, they got the handles on them. The bladder doesn't leak. I can throw them in my pack when I mow the lawn. When the guy who built our house, there's a bench in the master bedroom that I don't think it's covering maybe a HVAC duct or something. And that's about a step up. So even in the middle, right before the bed, I can grab the sandbag and do a bunch of step ups. Mm-hmm. Kind of like stepping on a box, like the CrossFit stuff. Yeah. And I took CrossFit, and it's great. I really like it, but it's pretty expensive, and it wasn't located at work, and the time to get away from my office and get over there just didn't work out. So for me, it's mainly finding the time and just pushing to make the time, even if it's 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So spin bike, running, sandbags, and a couple different fitness apps that, 15, 20 minute type workouts that I can do real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's neat. I do the same, Matt, with the sandbags. Actually, I have a brute force sandbag as well. I mean, that initial investment is more than worth it in terms of the durability of that thing. Between that and kettlebells, and again, going back to a previous episode, we talked with Rob Shaw from Mountain Athlete. Yep. And, I really enjoyed talking with him and was really intrigued by his programming. And he has some specifically for backcountry hunting, which I probably will do. But his whole concept is to be really like sport or event specific. So he specifically designed like his backcountry hunting program to be like, say, I think it's like 8 weeks in length, to be the 8 weeks before your big event. So I'm probably going to time that with the fall's hunting season. But
is that where they email you a workout?
Yeah. You basically purchase that program, and then you get instant access to all the sessions and the programming. I'm doing one from him now. It's just called Humility is the program. And it's kind of I'm the same way as you again, Matt. I don't like the gym. And it's a limited equipment program that mixes in some running, some movement under load, which I think is, as you were saying, is absolutely critical, for backcountry hunting just in general. And then limited equipment, like you just need a couple dumbbells and things, but you get to doing some, as you mentioned, some step ups, some lunges, some jumping lunges and all that. And then you mix in doing that under some load, and man, it shows you, some humility for sure.
Yeah.
Like you, I had pretty good running fitness, but you get into doing some of the strength and work capacity, preparedness, and it truly shows you, that you definitely have room for improvement. That's for sure.
And yeah, Bruce Force Gear, I'm not trying to plug them or anything, but they just came out with an app I've been playing around with. It seems to be pretty good if you haven't tried it.
Yeah, I have played with it some, for sure.
Some good workouts in there that are humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think you just can't replace getting out there and hiking with loads on your back. It's not something you can necessarily replicate in a gym. And
different muscles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I find it much more enjoyable to go on a hike with the kids in the evening. You know, living in Anchorage, the Chugats in our backyard, so 5-minute drive, we can be in pretty amazing country, and I'd rather do that than go spend a half hour in the gym by myself.
Yeah,
I remember flying into Anchorage, looking out the window, going, "Holy crap, that is beautiful stuff you just have in your backyard."
Yep.
Yeah.
So Matt, our listeners who are interested in sheep hunting, the vast majority of them aren't going to be able to get that over-the-counter tag and hunt in their home state, for sure. You know, for so many people, a sheep hunt is a destination hunt. It's, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime hunt just in terms of the investment of time and money into that. So, we're running short on time in terms of diving really deep into tactics and scouting and things like that for sheep. And then B, so much of that is going to be dependent upon, again, it's most likely going to be a guided hunt for folks. But for those folks specifically, maybe they're coming to Alaska for the first time. Maybe they're just going to get into sheep hunting for the first time, again, most likely with a guided hunt. We've talked about fitness, but any other things that they should sort of prepare for, whether that's gear, whether that's mental aspects, whether that's just really any way to prepare them for a sheep hunt?
Obviously getting your gear right and doing your research is probably the two critical things. But just got to be prepared for running into other people and realize when you get out there, you got to have 2 or 3 plans. This is what my buddy and I started doing. We ran into people was, okay, now what do? We only printed these maps, or we only downloaded this section on the GPS. And so where do we go next? So we've got to come up with 3 or 4 different plans and try to be creative when we get out there. That's one tactic in the field. And then just to talk with other sheep hunters. I've learned as much from being out and failing and succeeding as I have just from visiting with people. Mm-hmm. They may not share their secret spot, but everyone likes to talk through a successful stock. A few of them will even talk through one they blew. And Alaska just started the Alaska chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation.
Oh,
I'm getting involved in that. And it's just great to talk with other sheep hunters. Everyone says they hunt sheep in Alaska and that's their favorite spot to hunt sheep, which is a big state, right? So it's hard to get. I'm saying they won't give you their location. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you hunt sheep? Alaska. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Very helpful.
It's kind of a big state.
If you're lucky, you might get a mountain range out of them. They might admit to the Wrangles or Alaska Range or something.
Yeah.
But just trying to learn as much as you can from people around you. I think I've read a ton of books going even back to the guys that hunted the high hills in Colorado when that was anybody could do it almost back in the long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just learning through their failures help you mentally prepared because a lot of highs and lows because you get physically taxed.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Do any specific books or other resources come to mind as standing out as being extremely helpful to you?
One of my favorite videos is, I think it's White Sheep, Black Shale.
Okay.
I forget the guy who does it. That's a really good video. And at the end, he goes through full curl, which is helpful, and the definition of what is full curl. Tony Russ's books are kind of if a guy walked into Alaska and it was like a college class, those are probably the book they'd hand you, right?
Okay.
To start out with. I like a lot of the older books, to tell you the truth. I wish I could remember the names of them off the top of my head. They're on my bookshelf at home, but
yeah,
the hunts from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, when it was real sheep country then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, could we do this, Matt? Could you, after we record here, could you email me maybe some of those books sitting on your bookshelf, and I'll include them with the show notes?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can even take a picture of it and send it to you.
Perfect. So yeah, if you listeners want to get in on those, just check out the show notes for this episode at exomountaingear.com/podcast, and then go to the specific episode, and we'll be sure to include all that there on that page. So, all right. Well, Matt, we really, really appreciate your time. I'm having a feeling that we're going to have to do this again, because I certainly had more on the agenda that I wanted to cover with you, and really enjoyed everything we got through, but we'll probably have to get you back on here and talk a bit more deeper about sheep and specifically, and then just kind of hunting in Alaska in general. There's so much that we could talk about for sure.
Yeah, and I'm far from an expert, but it certainly is a great place to live and hunt and just explore. It's an amazing, amazing place.
Yeah, awesome.
Hey, Mac, real quick, do you got like a gear list on your remote pursuits?
I have kind of a large list, not a specific hunt list, kind of a generality list. Just because up in Alaska, if you're not specific for sheep hunting, you have to, you need different gear for a moose hunt than a sheep hunt. So I tried to make a general list.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking that'd be a great resource for guys, always getting questions about gear lists. And if that's on your website, we'll include a link to it on the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it should be on there.
Okay.
Awesome. Absolutely. Once again, it's just remotepursuits.com, right, Matt?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So, again, we'll link to it in the show notes, but if you guys just want to go check that out right now, remotepursuits.com.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, bud.
Well, thanks so much, as always, for listening, guys. Be sure to check out the show notes and resources about the Doll Sheep books that Matt referenced at exomountaingear.com/29. Until next week, we would love to hear your questions or feedback. Drop us a line at podcast@exomountaingear.com or leave us a review at iTunes. Thanks so much.